That's it. In all of Yeltsin's Russia, 2 academics bothered to put traditional values in a title. Out of 150 million people. 2.
That's not even enough for a conference panel. You'd have to invite the janitor to fill the seats.
Fast forward. Putin's era. Before Crimea, 75. Between Crimea and 2021, 234. After the invasion of Ukraine, 591. That's not a trend. That's a flood.
Wait, did you say 591? In how many years?
Avalanche is right. And it wasn't just the academics anymore. Suddenly, pro-government media is churning out articles with titles like Traditional Spiritual and Moral Values in Russian Law, or The Protection of Traditional Family Values in Modern Society. Conferences everywhere.
Conferences? On traditional values?
Events with names so long you'd need extra oxygen just to finish the sign. Traditional Russian Spiritual and Moral Values. Heritage, experience, and prospects. Sometimes religious, sometimes secular. Education, youth policy, even information security. Different speakers, different vocabularies. The same idea everywhere.
It's like a franchise. Traditional values, now open in every department. Get yours today.
And it kept expanding. Suddenly, it's not just about family or morality. Textbooks checked for traditional values. Films, exhibitions, same lens. NGOs, media, even international organizations. Everyone's being graded. Do you measure up?
So basically, any social problem, just slap a values label on it?
Exactly. Low birth rates? Clearly a crisis of traditional family values. Youth protest? Must be moral disorientation. Foreign influence, obviously. Tensions with the West? That's a clash of value systems. By the mid-2020s, traditional values wasn't a topic anymore. It was a Swiss Army knife for any problem. Simple answers, complex world. Easy certainty when everything else feels up for grabs.
And the beauty of it? Once you call it a matter of values, questioning isn't debate anymore. It's disloyalty.
That's the trick. But before we get too far, hi, I'm Gregory.
And I'm Dina. Today, how a phrase nobody can define, and everyone's afraid to question, became the most effective political branding in modern Russia.
We're tracing how traditional values went from an empty shelf to a loaded weapon. From Putin's bone-dry 1999 manifesto to the Orthodox Church to the UN to memes about spiritual bonds, all the way to a state decree that tells you what to believe and why everything else is a threat.
From 2 papers to 591. Let's see how we got here.
Here's the thing about traditional values. It sounds cozy, right? Stability, continuity, something your grandmother might knit into a sweater. But the moment it hits public debate, especially when someone says it needs protecting, suddenly the cracks start to show.
First thing, if there are traditional values, then there must be non-traditional ones, right? But here's the twist. Almost every value has a history. Very few are genuinely new. So it's not really old versus new, it's ours versus theirs.
And in Russia, ours is code for not Western. It's not about a clear moral code. It's about drawing a line in the sand. Traditional values become less a positive program, more a way of saying, whatever the West is doing, we're not.
So it's a definition by negation. We are what they're not.
But there's a deeper tension. Traditions aren't usually something you defend. They're just there. Family routines, shared habits, unspoken rules. If a tradition's really alive, you don't have to explain it. It just works.
But values are different. Values pop up when people have to choose, compare, argue. They're for when things get messy.
Exactly. The moment you call something a traditional value, you're turning a lived habit into a political statement. You're dragging it out of daily life and into the world of law and ideology. What was inherited becomes declared. What was lived becomes paperwork.
And all this talk about protecting traditions, that's not confidence, it's fragility. If traditions were really alive, you wouldn't need slogans and laws to keep them going. It's like putting a "do not resuscitate" sign on something, except in reverse. You keep reviving it because it's clearly on life support.
And that's where Alexander Dugin comes in. Yes, the ideologue whose ideas keep showing up in Kremlin speeches. And yet, he has a problem with the phrase traditional values. And it all starts with language.
The word values.
Exactly. He points out, values comes from the same root as value and price. It's about measuring, comparing, exchanging, buying and selling. And for Dugin, that's already a problem. Tradition, he says, isn't a shopping list for the marketplace. It's not up for negotiation. He wants tradition, fixed foundations, not items on a shelf.
I love this, because it's true. The moment you call something a value, you're putting a price tag on it. You're putting it under glass. And a tradition under glass? That's a museum piece.
A museum piece. That's a good image. Let's hold on to that, because I think it keeps coming back.
A tradition under glass, with an official label below it.
Now, even Ivan Ilyin, Putin's favorite philosopher, never talked about state-approved lists of traditional values. He talked about conscience, moral order, responsibility. Not checklists.
But there's an even simpler problem, right? The phrase assumes everything traditional is automatically good. And if you open a history book, well, it has some opinions.
It does. Slavery, caste systems, banning women from education, normalizing domestic violence. All called tradition for centuries. And in Russia, chronic drinking, beating kids, glorifying suffering, expecting people to keep quiet about injustice. All justified as the way things have always been.
Tradition, by itself, isn't a moral guarantee. If you treat it like one, you stop judging, and history stops being a lesson. It just becomes an excuse.
There's another voice here. Sergei Pereslegin, Russian futurist, expert on how societies think. Back in the early 2000s, he came up with a theory of mentalities: barbarian, aristocratic, intelligentsia, bourgeois.
So traditional values go in the bourgeois box?
Exactly. The bourgeois mindset is pragmatic, rational, all about social calculation. Born from early European capitalism. Work, property, contracts, family. Not sacred, just practical. Tools for keeping society running.
So in Pereslegin's world, traditional values are what? Plumbing? Infrastructure?
Basically, yes. They're there to stop things from falling apart, not to glorify the past. Family, morality, religion, they keep people predictable, help them get along, hold things together. Dugin says tradition is sacred, a mission. Pereslegin says it's a maintenance manual.
A sacred mission versus a maintenance manual. That's a spectrum and a half. And somehow, Russian state ideology wants both at once.
Which brings us to the beginning. A surprisingly sober document from 1999. Picture it. Late 1999. Putin, not yet president. He drops an article. Russia at the turn of the millennium. This is his big reveal just before taking the top job. It lands like a manifesto.
So what's the vibe? Is it fire and brimstone? Orthodox revival? Save the motherland speeches?
Not even close. This is all about the crisis of the 1990s, and Putin frames values as a matter of state survival, social stability. No thunder, no incense, just spreadsheets and anxiety.
Wait, so this is an engineer's document, not a priest's?
Exactly. 4 values laid out like bullet points. First, patriotism, responsibility for the country's future. Second, державность, great power status, Russia as a sovereign heavyweight. Third, государственничество, statism, strong state institutions. And fourth, social solidarity, citizens and the state, in it together.
That's it? No family, no faith, not even a passing mention of spiritual bonds?
Nothing. And get this, it doesn't reject Western values either. They're fine, as long as they don't mess with the state. The language? Secular, technocratic. You can practically smell the policy memos.
So the founding document of Russia's Great Moral Crusade is basically a management memo.
A management memo with national ambitions. And here's a twist. The article wasn't just Putin at his desk. Enter the Center for Strategic Research, run by German Greff, who later ran economic development. Think tank brains all over it. Market logic meets state muscle.
So the traditional values that got wrapped in Orthodox robes and sacred language, they started life on a think tank whiteboard.
On a whiteboard. In a crisis. As a tool to keep things from falling apart. That's the irony here. The museum piece, remember? It started as a working part. Only later did someone put it under glass and call it sacred.
The tradition under glass. Once it's there, you can't touch it. You can't question it. And you definitely can't admit it was manufactured last Tuesday.
During Putin's first decade, traditional values? Barely a blip on the state radar. The Kremlin was all about stability, growth, modernization. But the conversation didn't die. It just changed venues.
The Russian Orthodox Church.
Patriarch Alexei II, one of the first, maybe the first public figures to use traditional values in a political context. Back in 2002, in The Patriarch's Light, he warned, decades of militant atheism and disregard for tradition had weakened society. And I want to read his actual words, because the language matters.
Go ahead.
The disregard for traditional values, which has intensified in recent years, has contributed to the further destruction of society. If we want a worthy future, it is necessary to return to what the people lived by for 1,000 years.
1,000 years. That's quite a claim. And notice, it's never, let's build something new. It's always, let's return. The arrow only points backward.
Alexei II was clever, though. He tied traditional values not just to faith, but to education, family policy, social cohesion. He argued Orthodox culture could be taught voluntarily in schools, student and parent choice respected. Not theocracy, strategy.
Soft power investments.
By 2006, he's not subtle anymore. At the Moscow Diocesan Assembly, he declares, "You can't have real education without spiritual and moral values, traditional Russian ones." And he's meeting regularly with the president, ministers, governors, moral climate, interethnic peace, strengthening values. The church is now a partner in shaping society.
So Alexei II lays the foundation. Moral recovery, spiritual restoration, a pastoral touch. And then in 2009, Patriarch Kirill comes in and
cranks up the volume. Kirill keeps the faith and morals foundation, but now the state takes center stage. Family, faith, morality, they're not just personal ideals anymore. They're social norms. And they need backup from policy, law, The whole cultural machine.
So under Kirill, the church doesn't just suggest, it prescribes.
Alexei II, here are our moral foundations. Let's rediscover them. Kirill, here are our moral foundations, and the state should enforce them.
That's a big shift. From the museum curator who says, please admire this artifact, to the one who says, and you're not allowed to leave until you've memorized it.
And that's crucial for what happens next. When Putin comes back for his third term in 2012, the groundwork is already laid. The church has spent a decade building the language, the moral framework, all the relationships. Traditional values are already in the air. They just need a political moment to crystallize.
And that moment is the 2011 to 2012 protests.
Exactly. Here's the context. Under Medvedev,
Quick refresher, Dmitry Medvedev being the guy who held the presidency from 2008 to 2012, while Putin took a constitutional sabbatical.
right, Putin's seat warmer. And under Medvedev, it was all about modernization. Medvedev himself, pretty blunt about traditions. His 2009 Russia Forward article basically said, a lot of traditions are outdated or just plain harmful.
So what's worth keeping?
Things like interethnic peace, duty, hospitality, kindness. Corruption, laziness, drunkenness, toss them out.
That's surprisingly blunt for a Russian president.
It was. But here's the catch. Modernization raised expectations. Liberals thought economic progress would naturally lead to political reform, Western-style democracy. The Kremlin? Not so much.
So the protests hit, and suddenly modernization is a dangerous word.
The government pivots. Hard. Away from modernization, straight into traditional values. It's a way to unite society, claim the moral high ground, push back against liberal hopes. A homegrown alternative to Western models.
And this is where the memes start. Duchovny skrepi, spiritual bonds.
Yes, the phrase, first used by Patriarch Kirill. He called the Russian Orthodox Church a spiritual bond holding society together. But it only went political after Putin used it in his 2012 address to the Federal Assembly. He meant the moral glue of society. Mercy, compassion, mutual support, shared tradition, collective identity.
And the internet instantly turned it into a joke.
Instantly. The phrase was vague, abstract, almost comically earnest. People memed spiritual bonds to death. Empty rhetoric. And skrepi? It sounds like paperclips in Russian. The gap between lofty slogans and real life was just too wide.
You know what this reminds me of? It's like when a corporation launches a core values initiative, prints up some motivational posters, and every employee just rolls their eyes. The slogans have nothing to do with reality.
That's exactly it. And the government noticed. They mostly dropped the phrase, swapped it for concrete lists of traditional values in later documents. These days, the phrase survives as an ironic meme, a symbol of the gap between rhetoric and reality.
But here's what's interesting. The meme died, but the concept survived and got stronger. The paperclips didn't work, so they brought out the industrial-grade glue.
And here's why traditional values became so central. They solved a long-standing problem. For years, both liberals and conservatives accused Putin of running the country with no real ideas, no ideology, just pragmatism and admin control.
So traditional values gave him something to believe in, or at least something to point to.
A symbolic ideology. It appealed to conservatives, asserted moral authority, claimed a unique Russian path, all without needing a real philosophy.
The museum piece again. You don't need a philosophy. You just need a display case.
But there's an interesting nuance in the 2012 rhetoric. A lot of people miss it. In that same speech, Putin said, "The law can protect morality, but it can't impose it. Any state intrusion into personal beliefs would be totalitarian, unacceptable. Instead of bans, he called for moral foundations through education, culture, youth policy.
Wait, that almost sounds liberal.
It does. In 2012, values were still framed as a spiritual and social project, not a tool for force. The state was the moral guardian, not the police, formally rejecting authoritarianism while quietly building it.
So this is the velvet glove. The iron fist is coming.
Exactly. And here's a detail people forget. 2012 saw the adoption of the Strategy of State National Policy up to 2025. For the first time, a government document called The Erosion of Traditional Moral Values, a Threat to National Unity and Stability.
And did it say what those values are?
No. That's the remarkable part. No list, no criteria, no explanation. The term was treated as self-evident, like everyone would just know. Traditional values became policy, not as a goal to build, but as something under threat, something to defend. The defensive posture was there from the start.
A threat with no definition. Defend something you can't name from dangers you can't even specify. That's genius-level vagueness.
Quick break before we get back to the data. We don't have sponsors. Possibly because the words traditional values make most ad buyers flinch.
Their loss.
But we do have a Patreon. If you're enjoying what we're doing here, you can support us there. And patrons get bonus episodes on the books that quietly built Putin's Russia, the thinkers most people outside Russia have never heard of, the ones who either shaped this regime or predicted it word for word.
We already have one out, on Vadim Simbursky. In 1993, he wrote a paper that reads like a leaked memo from 2026. That's not a metaphor.
And, very soon, we drop the next one. Yuri Mamyev. Underground Moscow novelist, the warmest man in the room, also the author of the most horrifying prose in the Russian language. Wrote about the abyss like it was a day job, then went home to make tea for guests.
You're going to tell them about the bear, right?
The bear is the whole point. In Russian, there's a word for a bear that forgot to hibernate. Shatun. Half awake, half dangerous, breaking things from compulsion. Mamyev wrote a novel about people like that in 1966. 50 years later, the Prime Minister praised his treatise, Russia Eternal, on the day he died.
And what's actually in that book?
Russia sits between God and the abyss. Love for the motherland must be unconditional, stronger than love for God. Suffering isn't a problem to fix, it's a window. You start to see why the Kremlin couldn't resist.
Bears, the abyss, unconditional love for the motherland, and a metaphysician who pours you tea while explaining why your suffering is a feature.
Links in the description. All right, back to traditional values. Before we get to how this became law, there's a twist. Traditional values didn't just stay in Russia. They got exported.
To the UN, of all places.
March 2011, UN Human Rights Council. Resolution 16/3. Promoting human rights and fundamental freedoms through a better understanding of traditional values of humankind. Russia is at the center. Their pitch? You can't promote human rights without traditional values. Those are the source of dignity, cohesion, moral guidance.
And what did the West say?
Most developed democracies pushed back. They warned, it's vague, it could justify discrimination against women, LGBTQ+ people, minorities. Critics said the resolution flipped human rights logic. Now, tradition limits rights, instead of rights protecting people from bad traditions.
How did the vote go?
24 for, 14 against, 7 abstained. Supporters? Russia, China, a lot of Africa and the Middle East. Most Western countries voted no.
So Russia found its audience. Not at home, but abroad. countries where democracy is weak and authority is strong.
And that's the pattern. Traditional values, great export product. They give non-Western leaders moral cover to make their own rules, skip Western constraints. Awkward term or not, it sticks.
And then 2013, Putin's address, where everything sharpens.
This is the pivotal speech. In 2013, Putin tells the Federal Assembly, traditional values are the great dividing line between Russia and the West. He says, crucially, that society is being asked not just to accept freedom of conscience, but to accept the equivalence of good and evil.
That's devastating. He's not debating policies. He's saying the West has abandoned the whole idea of moral order.
And he calls it the destruction of traditional values from above. Change isn't democratic debate. It's imposed by elites. So he flips it. Liberalism isn't democratic. It's anti-democratic. It goes against the majority.
So Russia becomes the defender of moral clarity. Minority rights, pluralism, personal freedom. Suddenly, it's a civilizational struggle over good and evil. That's when traditional values stop being a preference and become a weapon.
A weapon. And one with a very sharp edge. So by now, traditional values are everywhere. State rhetoric, international export, shaping law and culture. But here's the real question. Do they actually work? Do Russians buy it?
This is where it gets interesting. The data.
In 2025, one of the most comprehensive studies dropped. Political Legitimacy and Traditional Values in Putin's Russia. Edited by Helge Blackisrud and Paul Kolsta. It's got survey data, regional case studies, all kinds of perspectives. And some of the findings are genuinely surprising.
The first chapter blew my mind. Russian popular values under President Putin, a conservative turn, or anomie. They go bottom up and show Russian conservatism is nothing like the Western kind.
The researchers found three main groups. About 30% liberal tolerant, pretty open on social issues. 13% anomic, not really attached to any strong values. Slightly more than half conservative.
And the conservatives? One block?
But even here, it splits. One cluster is patriotic, state-oriented, but fairly liberal on family and minority issues. The other? Patriotism plus xenophobia. Classic conservative attitudes.
So Russian society is way more nuanced than the backwards conservative monolith you get in Western media.
Way more nuanced. Then there's the kicker. The final chapter by Henry Hale. Has social conservative rhetoric boosted Putin's popularity? The data says appeals to traditional values didn't really boost Putin's popularity. Sometimes it even backfired, at least before the war.
So slapping traditional values on your message doesn't automatically win hearts.
It doesn't. Which raises the question, does the Kremlin know this?
We think, yes. Probably even better than the authors of this study. Kremlin sociologists have access to bigger, better, closed research.
So Putin's probably not using traditional values just to boost his popularity. He might even be sacrificing popularity to push them. This isn't populism. It's something else.
Like what?
Consolidating the conservative core. Pushing liberals to the margins, maybe even out of the country. Justifying confrontation with the West. Showing conservative Russians what they're fighting for. And, crucially, strengthening Russia's brand for non-Western leaders who want to act without Western rules.
So the museum piece? It's not really for domestic visitors. It's for the international tour.
The international tour. And it's selling better abroad than at home. Now we get to the part where it stops being talk and turns into law. The first real attempt to define traditional values came in 2018. Putin amended the Strategy of State-National Policy, and for the first time, a government document spells out the list. Patriotism, service to the fatherland, family, productive work, humanism, social justice, mutual assistance, collectivism.
Wait. Compare that to 1999. Patriotism, державность, statism, solidarity, the engineers list. Now suddenly we've got family, humanism, productive work. The display case just got a lot bigger.
Much bigger. And then, November 2022, Putin signs Decree Number 809. This is the big one. On approving the fundamentals of state policy for the preservation and strengthening of traditional Russian spiritual and moral values. Now, traditional values are formally defined and turned into a framework for everything: policy, education, culture, media.
So what's on the final list?
Respect for life and human dignity, human rights and freedoms, patriotism, citizenship, service to the fatherland, responsibility for the future, strong family, solidarity, mutual assistance, justice, mercy, spiritual meaning over material success, historical memory, continuity between generations, creative labor, unity of Russia's multi-ethnic population.
That's a lot. And that line about spiritual meaning over material success? Interesting. Could be Orthodox influence. Or maybe Dugin. He calls the primacy of matter over spirit a kind of Satanism. Either way, it's a civilizational contrast. The West worships material success. Russia claims something higher.
And notice, human rights and freedoms are now on the list. That wasn't there in 2018. On paper, these are very Western ideals.
On paper, sure. In practice, rights are violated. Civil society stays weak. Scholars call this symbolic co-optation. The state signals legitimacy, but tightly controls the meaning of these values.
And then there's the threats. The decree doesn't just list values, it says they're under attack.
Destructive ideologies, foreign cultural models, alternative values, even different takes on freedom. If they don't match the state's, they're a risk to social cohesion and national stability. Protecting traditional values isn't just cultural now, it's security.
And among all these threats, one stands out. The elephant in the room. Or, really, the rainbow in the room.
LGBT rights. Why do those take center stage in Russia's culture wars?
3 reasons stacked on top of each other. First, the church. In ultra-conservative Orthodox circles, homosexuality is all biblical imagery. Sodom, Gomorrah, sin, decay. What's changed is the reach. As the church's influence grows, that language moves from sermons into state speeches and laws.
From sermon to statute. Quite a career arc.
Second, demographics. Russia's population is shrinking. Birth rates are low. The state says the heterosexual family is a cornerstone of survival. LGBT couples? Non-reproductive, so supposedly not compatible with national goals.
So the child you didn't have is now a national security issue.
Third, symbolic power. Among all Western values, freedom, pluralism, minority rights, LGBT rights are the most charged and recognizable. In a society already homophobic, it's an easy trigger. The logic goes, Western values are bad because they promote homosexuality.
So when people scream about LGBT, they're not really screaming about sex.
No. It's a shortcut. A symbol that condenses all the anxiety about modernity, liberalism, change into one visible, stigmatized figure. The intensity isn't about sexuality, it's about fear, identity, power.
And there's one more bit in the 2022 decree: collectivism, community loyalty, mutual aid, shared responsibility. But Russian collectivism? Deeply contested.
Some historians point to the peasant commune, the big family, Soviet collective labor. Others say a lot of so-called collectivism was actually coercion. The commune was about control and redistribution under poverty. Soviet collectivism ran on state pressure, surveillance, punishment, not real cooperation.
And here's the deeper pattern: not real collectivism, but external conformity with internal individualism. People learn to play along in public, stay isolated in private. It's a survival strategy, not a value.
So today's talk of collectivism is about reclaiming a symbolic past, a story of unity and purpose, even if the real practice was fragile, forced, or missing altogether.
Collectivism as a museum piece, powerful as an idea, shaky as lived reality.
The museum piece again. Except now, it's not just under glass, it's in the Constitution. So, what do we actually make of traditional values?
Well, the term's clunky. It's easy to mock. Spiritual bonds became paperclips. Scholars say it doesn't even boost Putin's popularity.
And yet, as propaganda, it's worked. Not just in Russia. It found an audience in places where democracy is weak, authority is strong. After years of searching for a contrast to the West, Russia finally hit on something that sticks.
And here's the trick. Most traditional values, family, solidarity, responsibility, basic morality, are genuinely hard to argue with. The label wraps up familiar ideas in a patriotic, moral, ideological package. Simple, natural, almost unchallengeable.
And not just morally unchallengeable, legally too.
Meaning what? People actually go to prison?
They do. Spring of 2024. 2 staff at a provincial gay bar are arrested for running an extremist organization. Their crime? Working there. Russia's Supreme Court had declared the international LGBT movement extremist a few months earlier. They face up to 10 years.
10 years. For a bar shift.
Or earlier, a single father in a small Russian town. His 12-year-old daughter draws an anti-war picture in art class. The school reports him. He gets 2 years in a penal colony for discrediting the army.
Because the kid drew a picture.
That's how a value turns into a verdict. And that might be the most interesting thing here. Not that the Russian state invented an ideology, but that it made the absence of one look like an ideology. A display case with items, some genuine antiques, some reproductions, some still warm from the factory. And a big sign: do not touch.
A tradition under glass. Started on a think tank whiteboard in '99. Got blessed by the church. Got memed into oblivion, came back stronger. Got exported to the UN. Got written into law. And somewhere along the way, stopped being a tradition at all.
Whether you like it or not, you almost have to tip your hat to the inventors.
Almost.
If you want to dig deeper, check out Blackisrud and Kolsta's Political Legitimacy and Traditional Values in Putin's Russia, the most comprehensive book on the subject, with some real surprises. Elena Stepanova's piece on how traditional values became Russia's new national idea is sharp and clear. Novitskaya and team have a fascinating article on gender, sexuality, and the Soviet legacy in the conservative turn.
You know what stuck with me after making this episode? That Dugin point about values and price tags. The moment you label a tradition, you've changed it. You take it out of life, put it into politics. And once it's in politics, it's not really yours anymore. It belongs to whoever controls the display case.
Thanks for listening. If this made you think, argue, or roll your eyes, we want to know.
Stay curious and keep questioning what's under the glass.